Before you try to understand where you are going, pause and recognize where you are standing. You did not arrive at this moment by accident, nor did you drift here unaware. Every question you carried, every season that stretched longer than you expected, every silence that forced you inward instead of forward, has been shaping something precise within you. You may have thought those moments were delays, interruptions, or even detours, but they were actually thresholds. And thresholds are rarely loud. They are quiet places where perception changes before circumstances do. There was a time when your energy was spent simply trying to endure, trying to make sense of what felt unstable, unfinished, or unresolved. You focused on surviving the uncertainty, managing the weight, and learning how to remain standing without clear answers. That focus was not weakness. It was wisdom appropriate for that season. But seasons do not repeat forever. What once required your full attention is no longer meant to consume it. Something has shifted, not externally first, but internally. You are beginning to notice it in how you think, how you listen, and how you respond. What once overwhelmed you now informs you. What once confused you now deepens you. This is the moment where awareness turns outward without losing its grounding inward. The understanding forming within you is no longer just for personal stability. It is preparing to move, to circulate, to be expressed, not through performance or urgency, but through presence. You are carrying insight that was earned, not borrowed. And earned insight has a weight that cannot be imitated. This conversation is not about sudden transformation or dramatic declaration. It is about recognizing continuity. The same thread that carried you through uncertainty is now weaving purpose through clarity. Nothing was wasted, nothing was rushed, and nothing you have become is accidental. As you listen, allow yourself to settle into this knowing. You are not behind, you are not unprepared, and you are not merely recovering. You are transitioning, and transitions ask for attention, honesty, and trust in what has already been formed within you. You have been carrying more than most people realize, and you have been doing it quietly. Not because you wanted to be unseen, but because there were stretches where explaining yourself felt heavier than enduring in silence. There were questions you could not resolve quickly, seasons where clarity arrived slower than effort, and moments when the only thing you knew for certain was that you had to keep going without understanding why. That kind of persistence leaves marks. It shapes perception, it refines patience, and it builds an inner strength that cannot be rushed or replicated. What you may not have recognized until now is that those unseen seasons were not empty. They were formative. You were not idle during the waiting. You were learning how to remain present without immediate reassurance. You were discovering what it meant to sit with uncertainty instead of running from it. You were being trained in endurance that did not harden you, but softened you in the right places. Many people mistake stillness for stagnation, but you were not stagnant. You were stabilizing. You were shedding assumptions that no longer fit, releasing expectations that were never truly yours, and allowing your inner framework to be rebuilt on something more honest than urgency or approval. That work happens quietly, and because it is quiet, it is often undervalued, even by the one doing it. There were days when you wondered if the effort was worth it, if the patience you were practicing would ever translate into movement, or if you were simply learning how to tolerate less than you deserved. Those doubts did not disqualify you. They humanized you. They kept you from becoming rigid or detached. They forced you to ask better questions, not just about outcomes, but about alignment. And alignment is not something you arrive at suddenly. It is something you grow into through repeated, sometimes uncomfortable honesty. You have been honest with yourself in ways that required courage. You faced patterns that were familiar but limiting. You acknowledged fears that had been quietly steering your decisions. You admitted when something no longer fit, even when letting go meant stepping into ambiguity. That level of self-recognition is not common, and it is not accidental. It is the result of paying attention when it would have been easier to distract yourself, of listening inwardly when external noise offered quicker comfort. This is where real preparation begins, not with answers, but with awareness. Nothing you endured was wasted. The confusion taught you discernment. The waiting taught you timing. The pressure taught you boundaries. Even the moments of fatigue taught you where your limits were not failures, but signals. You learned how to recover without numbing, how to rest without quitting, how to hope without demanding certainty. These lessons do not announce themselves, but they accumulate. And now you are beginning to feel the weight of that accumulation, not as burden, but as depth. There is a difference between surviving and being restored, and you have been moving from one to the other without needing to label it. Survival taught you how to stay afloat. Restoration is teaching you how to stand with stability. You may still feel like parts of your life are unfinished, but unfinished does not mean unprepared. It means open. It means responsive. It means capable of receiving what could not have been sustained before. You are not the same person who first entered the season that challenged you. Your internal posture has changed, even if your external circumstances have not fully caught up yet. Recognition often arrives before resolution. You begin to see yourself differently before life reflects that change back to you. You notice that your reactions are slower, more considered. You pause instead of spiraling. You ask what something is teaching you instead of only asking how to escape it. These are signs of maturation, not resignation. You are no longer fighting every moment for control. You are learning when to engage and when to allow. That discernment is the fruit of lived experience. You have also learned compassion. Not the abstract kind, but the grounded kind that comes from knowing how heavy things can feel when answers are delayed. You are less inclined to minimize others' struggles because you remember how invisible your own once felt. This has expanded your capacity to listen without fixing, to sit with complexity without judgment. You may not have noticed, but your presence has become steadier. People sense that you are not rushing them toward conclusions. That steadiness is not accidental. It is a byproduct of the work you did when no one was applauding. There were moments when you questioned whether you were falling behind, whether others were moving ahead while you were still trying to make sense of your path. Comparison whispered that you were late, that you should be further along, that something must be wrong. But timelines are only meaningful when they align with capacity. You were being prepared for something that required more than enthusiasm. It required discernment, resilience, and credibility. Those qualities cannot be downloaded or imitated. They are earned through lived process. You are beginning to recognize that the clarity you now carry is not fragile. It is not dependent on constant reassurance. It can coexist with unanswered questions without collapsing. That is a significant shift. It means you are no longer anchored to certainty for stability. You are anchored to truth as you understand it, and that truth continues to refine itself as you grow. This is what it means to be grounded rather than rigid. Revelation does not always arrive as new information. Sometimes it arrives as a new relationship with what you already know. You are seeing past experiences differently now, not as isolated struggles, but as a coherent pattern of preparation. Pieces that once felt random are beginning to align. You may not see the full picture yet, but you can sense its direction. That sensing is enough for this moment. It allows you to move without forcing, to trust without rushing. You are allowed to acknowledge how far you have come without diminishing how far you still want to go. Recognition does not require complacency. It requires honesty. And honesty is what stabilizes you when momentum begins to build. You are standing at the edge of a shift, not because everything is resolved, but because you are. Your internal environment is no longer hostile to growth. It is receptive, attentive, and capable of integration. This chapter of recognition is not about celebrating endurance for its own sake. It is about understanding what endurance has produced in you. You are not just someone who survived difficulty. You are someone who learned from it without becoming defined by it. That distinction matters. It means your future will not be a reaction to your past, but a continuation of your development. As you sit with this awareness, allow yourself to rest in it. You do not need to prove anything here. You do not need to accelerate. Simply notice what has been formed within you, your steadiness, your discernment, your capacity to remain open without being overwhelmed. This is the foundation. And foundations are rarely visible once the structure rises, but they determine everything that can be built. Something has ended, even if nothing dramatic announced it. You may not have marked it with a decision or a declaration, but you can feel it in how you no longer fit inside the patterns that once defined your days. The season where everything revolved around recovery, self-protection, and internal repair has reached its natural conclusion. Not because you are finished growing, but because growth is now asking for movement instead of containment. What once needed to be held close is ready to circulate. What once required your full inward attention can now support outward engagement without collapsing you. This is how transition actually works, not as a sudden leap, but as a quiet widening of capacity. You are stepping into a phase where your life begins to expand across multiple areas at once, not all at the same pace, but all in conversation with one another. The internal stability you cultivated is no longer fragile. It can withstand complexity. This is why new responsibilities feel possible rather than threatening, why opportunities no longer register only as pressure, and why relationships are beginning to reorganize around who you are now instead of who you were trying to be. Expansion does not mean excess. It means alignment extending into more spaces. In your relationships, you may notice a subtle but important shift. You are less willing to over-explain or over-accommodate, not because you care less, but because you respect yourself more. You are learning that connection does not require self-erasure. As a result, some dynamics will deepen, grounded in mutual clarity and honesty. Others may naturally loosen, not through conflict, but through incompatibility with your current posture. This is not loss, it is refinement. You are making room for relationships that can meet you where you are, not where you once were trying to survive. Your sense of calling is also expanding, even if it has not yet taken a clear external form. What is changing first is not what you do, but how you understand why you do it. Purpose is becoming less about proving value and more about expressing alignment. You are less driven by urgency and more guided by intention. This makes your work, whatever form it takes, feel steadier. You are beginning to recognize that contribution is most sustainable when it flows from coherence rather than pressure. Financially, the expansion you are entering is not about sudden abundance or dramatic shifts, but about maturity. You are developing a clearer relationship with resources, seeing them as tools rather than measures of worth or security. This clarity brings patience. You are less tempted by shortcuts that promise relief, but compromise integrity. You are more attentive to stewardship, to pacing, to decisions that support long-term stability rather than short-term comfort. This kind of growth is quiet, but it builds resilience. Your health, physical, emotional, and mental, is also being invited into this broader integration. You are learning to listen to your body and your nervous system without interpreting every signal as a problem to fix. Rest is becoming proactive rather than reactive. Boundaries are becoming preventative rather than corrective. You are beginning to trust that caring for yourself is not a detour from purpose, but a prerequisite for sustaining it. Expansion without care leads to burnout. Expansion with care leads to longevity. Inner peace, perhaps more than anything else, is changing its texture. It is no longer dependent on everything being resolved. It coexists with uncertainty without escalating into anxiety. You are discovering that peace is less about control and more about orientation. When you know what matters, what aligns, and what you are willing to release, the noise loses its power. This does not mean you are untouched by stress. It means stress no longer defines you. You return to center more quickly. You recover with less self-judgment. This transition also requires a shift in how you measure progress. The metrics that once motivated you, speed, visibility, external validation, are losing their hold. In their place, you are learning to value consistency, integrity, and depth. Progress now looks like showing up honestly, making decisions that reflect your values, and allowing results to unfold at a pace that matches your capacity. This can feel countercultural, especially when comparison is loud, but it is precisely this steadiness that makes your growth sustainable. You may feel moments of impatience as this expansion unfolds gradually rather than all at once. That impatience does not mean you are ungrateful or misaligned. It means you are aware of your potential and eager to see it expressed. The key is not to suppress that energy, but to direct it. Expansion guided by impatience fractures focus. Expansion guided by trust compounds impact. You are learning how to hold anticipation without forcing outcomes. There will be invitations in this season to step into new roles, to take on greater influence, to speak more openly about what you know. Not every invitation will be yours to accept. Discernment remains essential. Expansion does not mean saying yes to everything. It means saying yes to what aligns and no to what distracts. Your clarity allows you to choose without guilt, to decline without justification, to engage without overextension. This is not selfishness. It is stewardship of your energy and attention. What is emerging through this transition is a more integrated version of you. The parts that once felt fragmented, your insight, your experience, your compassion, your ambition, are beginning to work together instead of competing. This integration is what allows your life to have shared impact without losing personal grounding. You are no longer split between healing and contributing. You are discovering that the two can coexist, that your growth can simultaneously support others without depleting you. Expansion also brings visibility, even in subtle ways. People may seek your perspective more often. Your presence may carry more weight in rooms you once felt peripheral to. This is not because you have changed your volume, but because your coherence is felt. Coherence attracts trust. Trust creates influence. Influence, when held responsibly, becomes a platform for service rather than ego. You are being prepared to hold that influence without being defined by it. As this chapter unfolds, remember that transition is not a single step. It is a series of adjustments. You will refine, recalibrate, and sometimes retreat briefly to integrate what is new. That is not regression, that is wisdom. Expansion that honors integration does not overwhelm the system, it strengthens it. You are not rushing into a future that demands more than you can give. You are moving into a season that matches what has been formed within you. The pace may feel slower than your excitement and faster than your comfort, and that tension is normal. It is the space where growth stretches without tearing. This is not the end of your becoming, it is the widening of it. And as you continue forward, you will notice that what once felt like effort is beginning to feel like flow. Not because life is easier, but because you are aligned. What you are stepping into now is not a reward for how much you endured, but a trust shaped by who you have become. This distinction matters because rewards can be consumed, but trust must be stewarded. You are being invited into a deeper relationship with responsibility, not the heavy kind that pressures or restricts, but the steady kind that anchors and guides. Stewardship begins when you recognize that what flows through your life is not meant to terminate with you, yet it is also not meant to exhaust you. Balance is the calling of this season. You are no longer being formed primarily through resistance. You are being formed through discernment. This means your future alignment will depend less on what you avoid and more on what you intentionally choose. You are learning that saying yes carries as much weight as saying no, and that discernment is not about fear of missteps, but about honoring what has been entrusted to you, your insight, your influence, your energy, your time. These are not infinite resources. They are living ones, and how you tend them determines their longevity. Identity is shifting quietly here. You are moving from defining yourself by what you overcame to defining yourself by what you cultivate. Survival stories will always be part of you, but they are no longer the center. The center is now stewardship. How you hold what you've learned, how you share what you know, how you remain teachable even as you become trusted. This requires humility that is active, not passive. Humility that listens. Humility that adapts. Humility that understands that growth does not end when influence begins. You may notice a growing sensitivity to misalignment. Situations that once felt tolerable now feel heavy. Commitments that once seemed manageable now require reevaluation. This is not pickiness or restlessness, it is refinement. As your internal clarity sharpens, your tolerance for fragmentation decreases. You are not meant to carry what distorts your peace or dilutes your integrity. Stewardship asks you to protect the conditions that allow your best self to remain present. Your future alignment will not be built on constant intensity. It will be built on consistency. You are learning the power of small, repeated choices that honor your values even when no one is watching. This is where trust deepens, internally first, then externally. When you trust yourself to act in alignment, you no longer need external pressure to stay motivated. Purpose becomes quieter but stronger. Direction becomes less dramatic but more dependable. There is also an invitation here to release urgency. Not ambition, but urgency. Urgency rushes outcomes without regard for sustainability. Stewardship paces growth so it can last. You are being taught to think in terms of seasons rather than moments, to value faithfulness over visibility. This does not mean you will not experience momentum. It means momentum will no longer define your worth or dictate your peace. You are learning how to move forward without abandoning yourself in the process. As your life aligns more fully, you may find yourself becoming a reference point for others, not because you have mastered everything, but because you model steadiness. People will notice how you hold complexity without collapsing, how you speak truth without aggression, how you lead without controlling. This influence is subtle, but it is powerful. It does not require you to perform or persuade. It requires you to remain rooted. Stewardship of influence means you are attentive to how your presence affects others, not in a self-conscious way, but in a responsible one. Your future will ask you to continue learning. Alignment is not static. It evolves as you do. What fits now may need adjustment later, and that is not failure. It is responsiveness. You are being trained to stay flexible without losing your core, to adapt without abandoning your principles. This is the mark of maturity, the ability to grow without becoming unstable. There will be moments when the path ahead feels less defined than you would prefer. Stewardship does not always come with a detailed map. Sometimes it comes with a compass, values, integrity, awareness, that guides your steps even when visibility is limited. Trusting that compass is part of your ongoing formation. You do not need to see every outcome to walk faithfully into what aligns. You only need to remain attentive and honest. Rest will continue to play a crucial role. Not rest as escape, but rest as integration. You are learning that rest is not the opposite of productivity. It is what makes meaningful productivity possible. In rest, you consolidate learning, you recalibrate intention, you restore capacity. Stewardship honors rest because it understands that depletion leads to distortion. A rested mind discerns more clearly. A rested heart responds more wisely. Your relationship with the future is also changing. You are less driven by fear of missing out and more guided by faithfulness to what is unfolding now. You are beginning to trust that what is meant for you will not require you to abandon your integrity to obtain it. This trust does not make you passive, it makes you patient. And patience, when paired with action, creates alignment that lasts. As you move forward, remember that you are not responsible for outcomes beyond your stewardship. You are responsible for presence, intention, and faithfulness in what is given. This releases unnecessary pressure. You do your part fully, and you allow the rest to unfold. This posture keeps you grounded even as opportunities expand. It keeps success from becoming consuming and setbacks from becoming defining. The future you are aligning with is not one where everything is easy or predictable. It is one where you are equipped to navigate complexity with clarity, where you can carry responsibility without losing peace, where you can contribute meaningfully without self-betrayal. This is not a destination you arrive at once. It is a relationship you maintain. You are being trusted with more because you have learned how to hold less without resentment. You have learned how to wait without disengaging. You have learned how to grow without rushing. These qualities will continue to guide you as new chapters open. So, remain attentive, remain humble, remain anchored. Let your life be shaped not by pressure to prove, but by faithfulness to what you've been given. This is stewardship. This is alignment. And this is how your future unfolds, not through striving, but through steady, intentional participation in what is already being formed within you. What unfolds next is quieter than anticipation expects, yet more powerful than effort could produce. This chapter is not about reaching outward for something new, but about allowing what has already been formed within you to become fully embodied. Integration is the work here, the subtle, ongoing process of aligning your inner convictions with your outer life until there is less friction between who you are and how you move through the world. You are no longer collecting insights, you are living them. And living truth requires a different kind of attention than learning it. You may notice that your days are less dramatic but more grounded. The highs are steadier, the lows are less disorienting. This does not mean you feel less deeply. It means your depth is now held by stability. You are learning how to remain yourself across changing environments, how to carry coherence into conversations, decisions, and responsibilities that once pulled you out of center. This is embodied presence, being fully where you are without abandoning what you know to be true. Integration often reveals itself through simplicity. You choose clarity over complexity. You respond rather than react. You allow pauses without rushing to fill them. These are not small changes. They are signs that your nervous system is learning to trust the life you are building. When the internal and external begin to align, your body no longer needs to stay on alert. You conserve energy. You direct it more intentionally. This is why presence becomes possible. You are not scattered across regrets or projections. You are anchored in now.